Good evening, everyone. So, welcome to our Wednesday evening, great evening to have it, our Retire Well webinar. I'm going to give people a minute or two just to jump in. So, if we can just wait a minute or two, we'll let people jump in and then we'll start our exciting topic of Retire Well. So, bear with me for 1 minute and then we'll get started. All right, so we've got some good numbers coming in now, so we might jump in. So again, welcome to our webinar this evening on Retire Well. So very exciting topic, I think. Who doesn't love retirement? And we're going to be talking about retiring well with more wealth and less worry. So that's a good goal to aim for, I think. To start with a little bit about myself. So my name's Kristin Sutherland. I am a financial advisor, I'm a strategist, and I'm a coach. So I work with people to give them more financial confidence, help them to grow their wealth, and importantly for our webinar tonight, to get retirement ready. I've got 3 decades of experience in personal property investing as well, very strong in the property space. I've been doing that for a long time myself, and I'm also the president of the Auckland Property Investors Association. So love the property space too. I'm a published author in the retirement planning space. So I've written a book on this called Dare to Retire Free. And that really focuses on a lot of the non-financial aspects of retirement. So some of those I'll talk about tonight, but most of the time we're going to be talking very focused on financial planning. And then I'm also an experienced retirement coach for both the financial and psychological well-being perspectives of retirement. I'm hoping that I'll be able to give you lots of value this evening about retirement. So let's jump in and see what we're going to cover. So this evening we'll cover looking at retirement goals and timeframes. We want to look at crafting a personalized wealth plan. So this is all about you, and it is personal to you when we're looking at these things. We need to work on optimizing income and investments. So we'll talk about how we can do that. We'll talk around the idea of decumulation strategies in retirement. And some of you may be very familiar with this, but most of us prior to retirement are familiar with accumulation, so accumulating things. And this will be savings along the way, but we want to look at what decumulation looks like. We'll touch on some estate planning options, and then at the end, we will hopefully have some time for questions and answers. All right, so a bit of a disclaimer, although I would love to know you all personally, I don't. So this presentation is provided for information purposes only, and the content of this presentation is not intended as a substitute for regulated financial advice. So I would like to get a little bit of a feel for who we've got on tonight. So I'm going to do a poll to give me a bit of a steer as to who I'm talking to as well. So let's have a look at the question. So are you confident you're on track for retirement? So that's to fund your retirement. I want you to answer either yes, I'm confident and I'm okay. Yes, I'm confident and I have enough. Or yeah, I'm pretty sure I'll be okay. Nope, I'm not on track. Or I don't have any plan to fund retirement. So if you guys could just pick, there should be the poll on the screen for you now, and it gives me a bit of a steer as to who's on there. All right, I'll give you a moment or two to do that, and Jessica, our producer, is going to come on and tell me how we went on that.
Hi, can you hear me, Chris?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so we have 11% who says yes, they're confident they have enough.
Awesome.
Roughly 44% say they think they'll be okay. 33% not on track, and 11% says they don't have any plan to fund their retirement.
Okay, so we're nearly 50-50. We're 44% of not sures, and then the rest of you, yeah, pretty sure you'll be okay, or yes, I'm confident. So that's excellent. It's actually just statistically quite different to the rest of the population, but that's great. It's obviously the people who are prepared to come on a webinar on Wednesday night who are going to be ready for their retirement. So let's start with we all want a comfortable retirement. So we don't want it to be uncomfortable. We want it to be comfortable. But many of us don't know if we're on track to retire well. So that was our sort of 44% of you that said, I'm just not sure if I'm on track. Now, why do we want to be on track for retirement? And why do we want to try and accumulate some wealth or some savings, along the way? So really it gives us options. So wealth in retirement just creates these options for us. And what we can do with those options are things like choose where and how we live. Really important. We want to choose where it is we live, and we want to be in a place that we like living. It might give us the option of retiring early or scaling back work hours. And for some, that's really important, like just having agency and choice over what you do with your day. A really important one is choosing the level of care that we're going to receive if we need it. So in retirement, if we need care, we really want to be able to choose that level of care. And hopefully for all of us, it's the best level possible. For some, the wealth in retirement is about creating an option of a legacy. So whatever your passion is that you want to create the legacy for, whether that's being able to give to charity, whatever that looks like, having wealth in retirement gives you that option. So it's about leaving that legacy. And if you've got people who are relying on you, maybe that's kids, then it's about helping the kids. So a lot of my clients, a really big driver for them is about helping their kids. And then the not so fun one is just having a buffer in case something goes wrong, because we know that things do go wrong. And so we want to have that buffer in place. If it doesn't go to plan, we're all going to have a plan, I'm sure, after this. If it doesn't go to plan, then what's the buffer? What's our backstop? Where are our guardrails? What's going to help us? So, as I said, you guys are not the normal statistic because how New Zealanders feel about retirement. So this is from research that 50% of Kiwis aren't prepared for retirement. So we're not too far off, 44 to 50%. 70% of people think that they will have to work past 70. Now that's okay if you want to work past 70, but if you're, got set in your mind, I would really like to retire at 65, or, health is, sort of saying that is what you would be the preference to do, then having to work to 70, is not where we want to be if we can avoid it. About 34% of New Zealanders could maintain their current lifestyle for 10 years plus on their retirement savings. Now that's not a very big statistic. So 34%, according to research, and that has been my experience with clients too, is that if you want to maintain your happy life, and that's what we want you to be doing in retirement, is that those savings are only going to fund you for 10 years plus just for 34% of you. So I think these stats speak to the lack of preparedness for the next generation for retirement. So what can we do about this? And that's what I get asked a lot by people. So let's have a look at some of the options for funding retirement. And this isn't all of them, but it's some of the ones that clients tell me, or that, we can bring into play as well. So some of the options include things like working longer. So we talked around that. So, a lot of people think 70% think they'll have to be working past 70. When it actually comes down to it, most people don't end up working longer, or even as long as they intended, because something happens, be that a health problem with themselves, be that they've just run out of energy to do it, be that they might have to be caregiving for a partner or someone else that's relying on them. So a lot of the time that working longer option unfortunately doesn't exist. There's the option of downsizing your home. So when I'm doing financial plans for people, a lot of people are like, but I'm going to downsize my home and it's going to be all right, Kristin. And I'm like, well, yes, we could put that in as part of the plan, but it can't be the whole plan. And we tend to find that for people downsizing their home, because it's not always about downsizing either, it might be right-sizing your home to something that suits what your retirement lifestyle is going to be. But if we do truly downsize and we think we're going to get some capital or some money out of that property, it may only fund us for 3 years. Now, that's what we've sort of found the average to be for our clients, that it funds them for about 3 years of lifestyle costs. So we don't want that to be the only option. Now, there's inheritance. Of course, we all know that we can't rely on it. We generally probably don't want it in the way that we get it. But if it's going to come, I say to clients, we can't rely on it and we don't know the timing of it. So it could be a bonus in the plan, but it can't be all of the plan. So a bonus, but not all of it. Selling a business, great. If you know you've got a business and it's successful and there's a market for it, with the speed of things changing at the moment, we want to make sure we're not just relying on any one of these things, and maybe in particular selling a business to fund our retirement. So, we need to be drawing on lots of different places. But selling a business, if we've got it, good, legitimate option if it's a good saleable business. A reverse mortgage. Now, this isn't generally our first choice for people, but it is an option if we need to take it. But it's a bit further down the chain of things that we want to be doing if we can avoid it. But I also don't want people taking lots of money to the grave with them if they didn't enjoy life along the way. So I'm not against the reverse mortgages. It's just that it's not my first option for clients generally. And then they're spending less in retirement, which doesn't sound as fun as any of those other things, but that's often the reality for people and how they're going to be funding retirement is spending less. All right, so this is some of the options for funding your retirement later. But as you can see, it's really important to start early so that we don't have to rely on just these options. All right, so let's look at, because then the other thing I get a lot from clients is, but I'll have New Zealand Super. Now, the thing with New Zealand Super is it has some assumptions that come with it, really, to be able to afford the lifestyle that you want on New Zealand Super. Firstly, it assumes we're mortgage free. So being mortgage free is really important, and we work really hard for clients going into retirement to get them to this mortgage free, because they really need that to be able to have the life they want at a minimum on New Zealand Super. It means we will be working until 65. So we don't get access to New Zealand Super until we're 65. So it's going to assume if we're just relying on New Zealand Super that we're working until 65. And that might not be what you want to do. It generally means we're not helping the kids. So, if that's in your plan, or if it's helping other family members or, people who are reliant on you, it's really hard to do on New Zealand Super. And New Zealand Super, if that's what we're relying on for everything, it really is a no frills lifestyle. So if we can sort of go that we're comfortable with all of those things, maybe New Zealand Super will be enough. But for most people, most clients we work with, it's not going to be enough to fund their happy life or their life that brings them joy. And that's really where we want to try and get you to. There's no point saying, I'll be okay if we could make it better. So let's look at the starting point. So, of course, many people aren't sure where to start when it comes to investing or growing their their wealth ahead of retirement. They are unsure of what they need, where their money will come from, or even if they're on track. So let's look at where we start. Firstly, when we're working with people or looking at, what does retirement look for you, we need to look at securing your financial foundations. Now, we'll go into this in more detail in a few slides, but those financial foundations are really important. And they include things like mortgages and cash flow, all the things that people think are a bit boring, but they're really important, and they are our foundations. Then we need to understand what you'll need. And it's about you. It's not about what I'll need or what someone else needs in retirement. It's about what you need. So what does it cost you, and what do you need in retirement? Where do you want to live? What's that going to cost? What are your hobbies going to be? Do you want to travel? All about understanding what you'll need in retirement is really important. Then determining where the money is going to be coming from in retirement. So having a plan of, I know what I need and I know where the money is going to come from to cover that. Then we've just got to gauge how you're tracking currently. So how are we going at the moment? Are we on track to get to the amount we need after we've understood what that is? And then if we need to, it's about establishing what we call the savings gap that you need to bridge. So sometimes, we will have enough and we'll be on track, and sometimes we're not. And it's way better to know earlier if we're not on track and what that gap is and how we're going to close it. So the earlier we start on that, the better. If you haven't, addressed it yet, that's okay. We start where we are, but the earlier we can do it really is the better. And then we have to take less risk and it's easier to bridge. Another really common question is how much I'll need. And I think I've addressed some of that in that it's about you, but we do have a bit of a rule of thumb. So for many, what holds them back is not knowing where to even start. How much do you need to retire? So there are many unknowns, especially if retirement feels like a long way off. We don't know what the world will look like, what inflation will do, whether New Zealand super will still be what it is today, or if it'll eventually be means tested. So at Enable Me, we have a bit of a rule of thumb, and that's to set your goals to be roughly 25 times your annual living cost. Now we need to know our annual living cost. So 25 times our annual living cost. We also want you to be mortgage free by that point if possible, and then having financially independent kids. So if kids are part of the equation, having financially independent kids who are going to be able to look after themselves allows you to have a more comfortable retirement. So that's our rule of thumb, but I need you to work out that what your annual living costs are to be able to do this. So let's start to get into what a wealth plan is, because we're talking about this wealth plan funding retirement. Now, the wealth plan needs to be flexible. So things change. We all know that. We've been through enough of life. I think if you're sitting on a seminar about retirement, we've been through enough of life to know that it really needs to be flexible. It needs to be dynamic. So it has to be able to change with things as they change. We need those built-in buffers for the rainy day. So we know things go wrong. We need to have some buffers in place to account for those. And I would like it to be enhanced by positive behavior and spending habits as opposed to negative behavior. So we want our wealth plan to be positive behavior and spending habits, and it's got to be formed on this strong financial foundation. So let's look at what this strong financial foundation is. So strong foundations, like building a house, are everything. I think the Christchurch earthquakes proved that for us in New Zealand. Just like you wouldn't build a house on shaky ground, you can't achieve financial success without solid money habits. Think of your habits as the concrete foundation. You want them strong so everything else stands tall. So you don't need to be the rock to have financial discipline, but you do need to rock your habits. So having these strong foundations is really important. The second foundation is about goal setting. So set your goals like GPS coordinates for your money. Your financial goals are like a map. Without them, you'll be driving around aimlessly and wondering why you never arrive somewhere. So set targets, big or small, and let your money work towards where you actually want to go. So we need to know where you want to go, and then we can set the goals to get there, and then the plan can follow from there. Now, the third foundation is cash flow management. And most people roll their eyes and tell me that's a bit boring, but it is really important. And it's one of those like key things that if people get it right, a lot of other things flow really well after that. So think of cash flow like grocery shopping. If you go in without a list, you'll end up overspending on things you don't need. So when you don't keep track of where your money is going, it's really easy to lose control. So having a plan helps you avoid impulse buys, helps you stay on track, and it leaves you with enough for the things you actually need. So when we're working with clients, we talk a lot about what's called the fritter, and it's the things that you spend money on that don't bring you joy and that you don't actually need. So if we've got a cash flow management plan and a structure and a strategy around that, it helps us to spend money on the things that do make us happy and then plan for the future as well and look at what savings and things we've got. And the final bit of this financial foundation is mortgage management and KiwiSaver. So debt and KiwiSaver, they clear the clutter and make your money hustle. So get the right strategies in place, make your money work harder for you. So these foundations I'll keep coming back to throughout the presentation as well, of we need to get these right so that we can retire well with less worry. So when to start? It's a question that so many people ask. And I'm always like as early as possible. Don't panic if you haven't done it yet, but if you haven't done it yet, start now. So the more options we can create when you start early, the more time you have to create them when you start earlier, and the sooner we'll identify problems if we start early. If we can identify the problems earlier, we can also identify the solutions. So the sooner you start, the better. And I love the quote by Warren Buffett that someone is sitting in the shade today because they planted a tree a long time ago. So let's plant that tree as early as possible, so that we can be sitting in the shade of that in our retirement. Okay, KiwiSaver. Lots of talk about that at the moment and some changes coming up. So let's talk a little bit about KiwiSaver. KiwiSaver is a great foundation, but it's not a complete retirement plan. The employer and government contributions do make it highly beneficial, but many people assume it's enough, but for most people, there's a shortfall. So regularly reviewing your KiwiSaver ensures you're on track for your goals. So our wealth plan, we're setting our goals, and then we're seeing if we're on track for them. And if you plan to retire before retirement age, so before 65, please have investments outside KiwiSaver, because it is only available to us generally from 65. There's a few other circumstances where we can get it for first home and things like that. But generally, if we're using it for retirement, it's available to us at 65. So have another plan if you're retiring early than that. Now, of course, we've got some big changes coming up for KiwiSaver this year, when on April in 2026, so this year, we've got the default contribution rising from 3 to 3.5%. And I think that's a real positive. So, the earlier we can get people saving, and the magic of compound interest is going to work for all these young people who are doing 3.5% and then 4% in a few years. So I would encourage people to make sure they take up that opportunity to contribute 3.5% and not opt down, because there is an option to opt down. We do not want anyone doing that. We want, if they can, to take that. And that means also your employer's contributing 3.5% as well. So it's like a little pay rise. Okay, let's have a look at some of the retirement projections for different scenarios. So we've talked a bit about the plans, what our goals should be, but I'm going to look at some scenarios, and then I'm going to tie these back into mortgage management. So let's look at our first one. So this is really the default scenario for a lot of people. We have a mortgage, we get it for 30 years, we get this mortgage up until we're 65. So everyone says, I want to have the house paid off by 65. But what that does is it gives us quite limited retirement options. So if we look in the graph here, we've got the blue line that goes up to our black line, which is our age. Then at 65, we've repaid the mortgage. So we've got that back down to 0. Then the green line comes up from our black line, and that's our KiwiSaver. So we get a bit of a burst, and this is about the amount of net worth you've got. So we're negative, negative, negative. We get to 65, we paid off the mortgage. Now we get a bit of a hit, we get KiwiSaver. Now we find for clients that the average KiwiSaver for the average client is lasting until they're about 69. So at that point, we're now relying on New Zealand Super. And we've discussed that may or may not be enough for people, and for most people it's not. So we need to know, how long is that KiwiSaver going to last us, and how long are we trying to fund retirement for? So our goal is to get our clients to a comfortable retirement until 90. Now, we're not all going to live until 90, but we want to be comfortable if we do. And there might be a lot of us, especially in this generation, that now live past 90. So we're trying to look at, how do we extend this savings out? And one of the ways to do it really is about paying down that mortgage quicker and giving us some more options to create wealth. So I know now we've started discussing wealth creation. Many of you might be wondering why I've jumped back to discussing mortgages. But in our view, your mortgage reduction strategy plays a pivotal role in your wealth creation plan. So repaying the mortgage early increases time frame to build wealth for retirement. So it's all tied in, and we want it to be part of the plan. So let's look at another scenario where we pay the mortgage back quicker. And now there's ways to do that, but that's a whole nother webinar. But we want to be able to pay that mortgage back as quickly as possible, directing our savings there, structuring the loans in the right way so we can do that, and making sure we're not frittering money. So we're not, spending money on things that we don't need or that they don't make us happy. And then we get mortgage free earlier. So in this scenario, we're mortgage free 10 years earlier, which you'll see then gives us an opportunity to build wealth. So our green line is now us building wealth because we're using our savings to build wealth and creating it. Then we get to our lighter green line, which is our KiwiSaver. That comes in, and then we start spending money. So this, in this scenario, gets us to age 80, which is much better than our 69. And then if we actually did a wealth plan that extends further, we can get those savings to stretch a bit further from 80, hopefully to 90. But you'll see in this scenario how just getting that mortgage paid back earlier gave us some time to create wealth, and then it gave us more options in retirement. So what are some of the other wealth options? So we talked about the mortgage here, but what are some of the other ones? So there's many ways to invest, but not all suit your situation. Some options require more capital to start. So something like a business or property requires a bit more capital, whereas others take time and expertise. So, and the other thing is the higher the risk can mean a higher reward, but there's also greater uncertainty. So as we look at the different wealth options, we have to think, is there a level of risk there that I'm comfortable with, that I can tolerate in terms of where I'm trying to get to and what sort of gap I'm trying to close for my retirement? And I also say to my clients, it's got to pass the sleep at night test. So if you invest in something and can't sleep at night, then it's not worth it. It's too much risk for you. So this is also about you balancing your risk profile. Okay, a little graph here just to highlight that balancing risk and return. So risk and return go hand in hand. The safer options yield lower returns. Cash is stable, but it won't grow your wealth. And business is high risk, but it's high reward. So we're linking these two. We've got business being sort of our highest risk, but our highest reward on this graph, and cash being our lowest risk, but our lowest reward. Now, we can choose what we invest into depending on what that gap is. Remember, we talked about the savings gap or the retirement gap of how much we need. So we work with clients and we look at what that gap is if they've got one. Not everyone does, but if you do, we say if that retirement gap is over 300,000, so for some people it's significantly more than that, and for some it's less, we are likely going to have to use leverage to bridge it. So let's come back to how we might solve that problem. So in this scenario, we're going to take one of the options of building wealth, which was property, and just have a quick look at what that looks like. So property here, we've got 160,000 to invest. So with a property in this scenario, we've got 160,000 deposit, and it lets us control an asset of 800,000. So we're using leverage in this scenario to give us an asset that's more expensive than what our initial investment is. At a 6% increase per year on that asset, we get a $48,000 return. If we compare that to, say, a managed fund, where we generally can't leverage into a managed fund, on our 160,000, if we get a 6% return, we get 9,600. So the higher return on investment is that we get this 48K gain from, and that's a 30% return on our initial investment on property compared to a 6% in a fund. And this is just about leverage. So that's one of the ways, if we've got a big gap, that we could use an asset, and in this case it's property, to close that gap. What about if we leave it in the bank? So, I know a lot of people are a bit nervous sometimes about investing in different asset classes that they're not sure of, but there is risk with just doing the default, which might be leaving in the bank, and that's inflation. So inflation really is the silent thief of savings. Your interest won't grow you wealth, and investing beats stagnation. So if we look at this example, to just outpace inflation of 3%, which is where New Zealand is at the moment, a little bit higher than that actually, but we would need to grow our 100,000 to 115,000 over 5 years just to keep the same buying power of our money, or 134,000 over 10 years. So sometimes that's not an option, and it's not going to get us where we want to go. I'll talk briefly on if you do have assets at the moment. So if we're looking at, I've got some assets, what do I do with them? Let's talk investment properties as one of them. So reviewing what you've got is really important. So if you've got properties, are they still right to hold? Are they still going to do what you need them to do in retirement? If not, should you sell and buy a new property that will do what you want it to do? Maybe that's about having higher cash flow. Should you sell and invest elsewhere? Or do you keep it and use the leverage to buy another if we're trying to close a gap like that? So reviewing things regularly is important. Not everything's just a set and forget. So properties are definitely something that we want to review. If you've got other investments, review your portfolio. Should you sell? If we've got asset growth rate compared to alternative investments, we need to compare that and see if it's doing the best it can. We want to compare hold costs of different assets. So what does it cost us to hold them, and what sort of return are we getting? We might want to liquidate some assets to get some better ones. So that was talking about, maybe it's, if the property's not performing, it needs to be liquidated for something else. Now, if you're not sure, I would really say to people, get some financial advice so it's really tailored to you. Okay, we're going to talk now a little bit about once we are retired, what we need to think about. And this is really a mindset change. So we're going from accumulation to decumulation. We've spent a long time sort of saving to get to retirement, but in retirement, we have to start spending these funds. And that's about what we call decumulation. So your strategy changes because now we have different cash flow needs. We might have different people who are dependent on us, be kids or family. Their needs might change. And we need to know that we can also absorb some volatility. So that's the market or something going up and down and giving us different returns. So very important to go from accumulation to decumulation. Now, what are some of the options for decumulating? It's always a lot of discussion about these. So let's look at some of them. So you could try and live off the returns from your investments. That's one way we can decumulate, though we will need a significant number in terms of our savings to achieve this. You could take out a set amount per year, but often that doesn't take into account inflation, so we need to be mindful of that. You could take out a set percentage per year. Again, we need to be mindful of inflation. Well, one of the other ways we talk about is the phased approach. So think of this like having 3 buckets. So we might have a bucket that's our savings account, and that's our 3 to 5 years worth of living expenses, a bucket that has fixed income securities in it, and a bucket that has equity. So it might be shares. So our fixed income might be bonds or term deposits. With this approach, we draw from our first bucket, which is our savings account, to cover your expenses. And then you refill that bucket when it starts getting empty from our other 2. And then we get to decide at what point, our equities are going well or our other bucket's doing better. And we sell from there to fill up our savings bucket. So that's called the phased approach. So lots of different ways there that we can start accumulating, and you need to work out for you what's going to work. I'll briefly touch on this slide because we are running out of time, but we've got different phases of retirements, and this is one that's actually quite close to my heart because it also talks around the psychological side of retirement. And research shows us that there are different phases in retirement. So we sort of have these first 5 to 10 years, our next 10 years, and then our final years. So in those first 5 to 10 years, we need to be having our investment that we're going to be using there in low risk. It's our real active time. We're doing our bucket list. We're traveling. We're doing all these fun things. It's higher expenses. And in terms of mindset, we call this the honeymoon phase. So it's the first sort of 1 to 2 years in terms of the mindset, but 5 to 10 years if we're thinking about it financially. The next 10 years we move in, we might be a bit less active. We've got some rising healthcare costs and fixed costs as well. We need here, when we first retire, we need the funds for this to be invested in some income and growth. So we don't want this investment in our 10-year category here to be sitting in low risk because we do need it to be growing. And for some people, this is a bit of a disenchantment phase. So after the first 1 or 2 years of retirement, people might go into this, and that's where we need to do some work on the psychological side as well as that financial side. And then the final years of retirement, if this is like a 15 years away from when we first retire, so these final years, we need to make sure we've got growth assets set aside for this period. So they're growing, and then we can draw them down when we need them. We've got higher healthcare costs, and we're considering legacy. And a lot of the time in this phase is where people really reorientate themselves to who they are and their purpose. So lots of different things there. I could go into it a lot more, but we'll move on at the moment, but just considering those different phases. And then we talked a bit about future proofing our wealth. So if we're building it and we've taken all this effort to get there, some things to consider are looking after it, make sure we're not going to lose it. So things like insurance policies. Do we have enough insurance? Do we have too much? I actually have some clients that come along and have these large insurance policies, and I have the conversation of what are we insuring against at the moment. So it's thinking about what am I trying to achieve with my insurance, and do I have too much or not enough? Setting up our structures of how we've got things owned and where returns are coming into, and tax structures and things like that. And we can consider things like companies and trusts to look at if that can be the most efficient. And then what financial legacy we're going to leave. So it's sometimes that's around setting expectations. So sometimes I have to have some hard conversations with clients, or really talking to their kids through the clients of saying, what is the expectation of what you're going to leave and what you want to leave? Because remember, this is your plan and it's about you. And then putting a will in place. I have so many people that I see that don't have wills, and it is so important to have that there. And it's not about you, really. It's about what's the people who are left behind. It makes it so much easier if we have wills in place to take care of those assets that you've worked so hard to get, and that they go to where you want them to. Powers of attorney are important. So this is about if you survive an illness or an accident or something like that, but you can't make decisions for yourself, who's going to control the button on your healthcare and make those decisions, and then who's going to look after your assets for you? So powers of attorney do that. And then thinking around rest home subsidies. If you'll need care, what does that look like and how are you going to fund it? So there was lots of information, I realize, in quite a short period of time. But some of the key takeaways, hopefully for you tonight, is that you can understand that setting those goals and your timeframes is really important. And then we use that to come up with the strategy and the plan. So what do you need? It's only you who can determine what it is that you're going to want in retirement and know how much life costs. So you need to work that out and then do some planning around that. Check your current investments are working for you as hard as they can, and determine how you'll manage your finances once you retire. So we talked around those decumulation strategies, and then making sure you're protecting that wealth and preparing your legacy. So that was around making sure we've got insurances in place, we've got wills, we've got powers of attorney, we've set up the structure so that it's going to do what we need it to do. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. I hope you got some great takeaways from that this evening. In terms of what we do here at Enable Me, and I talked a lot about seeing clients and working with them. One of the things that's really important, and a really important part of that process, is this initial what we call financial consultation. So it really is a value-packed 90 minutes with a strategic coach to get you off the starting block. So if you're not sure where you're going, really great to sit down with someone, just assess where you are, highlight where you need to focus your effort, and to get ahead faster. You get a rough sketch of your financial plan from this, and it's the beginnings of a blueprint for your future. So it's well worth 90 minutes if you've got that to come along and just start thinking about what is the plan, and how am I going to put it into play. Now, for giving up your Wednesday and coming along and to spend that with us, there is an offer that you can book a consultation to get one of those financial consultations tonight, and that's for $100 if you do it tonight. If you do it after then, it's $149, but well worth it. So I'll leave up that QR code so that you can scan it and you can book the consultation from there. And I think we have some time for questions.
Thank you so much, Kristin, for your time. Excellent presentation. Just checking you can hear me okay
again. Sorry, Jessica, did you say, can I see you?
No, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can hear you.
No. Okay. Okay, so we've got some questions that have come through. Thank you for sending them through ahead of time. First question, I'm 62. I think I'm in a position to retire early. What are the non-financial pros and cons of retiring early in your view?
Yeah, so as I said, this is quite close to my heart, this one. So, really knowing if you're ready to retire, forget the financial side of it for a moment, but psychologically. So, the reason why I actually wrote this book about retiring and that psychological side was a very personal story to me. It was because my dad retired. He actually retired early. He'd been in a profession his whole life and was really looking forward to retirement, but had done no planning for that psychological side. First day of retirement, collapses under the table. He was out to lunch with my mum. They were enjoying first day of retirement, rushed off to hospital. No one knew what was going on. And it was the emergency room nurse said to him, actually, anything changed for you today? And he said, oh, yes, I retired. And she said, oh, you're the fifth one this week. Now, this was not a large city hospital. It was quite a small sort of regional hospital. He was the fifth one that week. And she said, two of you have walked out and three have gone out in body bags. And it was about that not knowing what they wanted to do in retirement. And, you know, the more I love research and I love the area of retirement, the more I've looked into this, it's quite a common story. So people going into retirement doing no planning for the psychological side. They might have done the financial side, but that psychological side of what's going to be your value and purpose and how are you going to structure your day, and, you know, are your friends going to be the same and are your hobbies going to be the same? What does that look like? So doing some planning around that, really important. And again, the earlier you can start, the better. It's the same as financial. We want a plan of how that's going to happen. So think about first day of retirement. What are you going to do? How are you going to structure it?
Nice, thank you so much. I've just had a couple of live questions come through, so I'll just tick these off. So, someone's asked, how about family trusts? Does that work here in New Zealand?
Yeah, so again, it depends on what you're trying to achieve from it, but there are some benefits of family trusts. Of it might be for asset protection that you're looking for, but you need to look at really the reason why you're doing it, because there is always a cost associated with any sort of structure that we set up. But family trusts can work well if it's achieving what you're trying to do. So if it's about protecting assets or distributing income out to different people in the family, that's a really good way to do that. But you really want to get personalized advice on that as to whether a trust is the best or a company, or whether it's just in your own personal names. But and know what is it I'm trying to achieve by this trust. But there are some, you know, pros and cons of all of those, and trusts, you know, do have a lot of pros for asset protection and, you know, distribution of income.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kristin. The next one, so we didn't really get into the details of, it's quite different saving for retirement as a couple versus as a single person. So I wondered if you can touch on, so someone is just asking, do you have an alternative approach for people, for particularly single women? Do you have an alternative approach for people in this situation?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's an alternative approach, because generally the assessment is the same. So we're looking at where are we starting from, and that's for anyone. It's like, where are we starting from now? What's our current situation? And then where are we trying to get to, and what options are open to us? So I do have a lot of single women that I work with, and it might be that if they're trying to get to a place, I think it is harder for someone on their own as opposed to a couple to do things like that sort of leveraged investment, just because we don't have the same amount of income necessarily. But it's not impossible. So it's about looking at where you are, where you're trying to get to, and how do we do that? We just make a plan for it. But I have a lot of single women that I work with that have very good, solid financial plans, but the process doesn't change. So, do I have a different process and assessment? No. I'm saying, here's where we're starting, here's where we're trying to get to. Is there a gap? Let's try and close it. What sort of risk do we need to take? It might be that we need to take slightly higher risks if you're a single as opposed to a couple. It might be. I'm not saying all the time, but then we know and we can put that plan in place. So, yeah, acknowledge that, for single people, women or men, often harder to do those leverage things, but not all the time. But just knowing where you are, where you want to get to, what's the cost in the middle, and how do we work a plan to suit that.
Wonderful, thank you. We are running out of time, but so many good questions have come through. So I'll just do two more. And sorry if we didn't get to your particular question. So the next one is, how can we maximize saving for retirement following a divorce?
Yeah, so um, Again, it depends on what we're trying to achieve. So it is a tough one because often we're dividing assets and we're used to different levels of income if we're in a couple as opposed to if we're now doing this on our own. But again, it doesn't really change. It's the same as the question about, a single person as opposed to a couple. We've just got to start where we are, and put the stick in the sand and say, this is it, this is where we're starting from, and this is where we're trying to get to. And again, it often is that we might have to take some higher risks than we might have previously if we weren't divorced. But if that's what it is, then we just need the plan in place to do that. And we might need some more guardrails around, how we're going to do that. So better protections of insurance and things, because if it's just someone and you're on your own as opposed to in a couple, it may be that we need some better policies around income protection and trauma, because if we lose one income, we don't have the other one there to sort of, act as the backstop. So not entirely different, but it's just maybe we need to take a bit more risk if that's later in life as well. If it's not later in life, it doesn't really change the plan a lot. As long as we've got enough time and runway, we can always come up with a solution.
Nice, thank you. And final question from Angie. Is the consultation face-to-face or via Zoom?
You can do it either way. So yeah, you can do it face to face or you can do it via Zoom. So up to you entirely. Yeah, whatever suits you.
Nice. It also depends on where you live. So we have coaches in Auckland, Wellington, Bay of Plenty, and Christchurch. So if you're in those areas, there's a coach you can meet face to face. But if you're outside of those areas, you can meet via Zoom. So yeah. But
Great point, Jessica. It's very true. We don't have coaches everywhere.
yeah. Great. Thank you so much, Kristin. I'll leave it with you to close and yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you. So I want you to hopefully take one thing away from this, is that we need a plan. So if you haven't got it, go and start thinking about it. If that's the first step you take, start thinking about that plan. If you really don't know where to start, come and see us and we can help you with that. So thank you very much. Have a lovely rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone.